OB problems, basket issues, and a boring course? Oh my, we must be back in Kansas. What's up, degenerates? We're the Disc Golf World. I'm Jefferson, and alongside me, Swiss Cheese. And even though we didn't shuck any corn in Emporia, doesn't mean we aren't going to break down everything you need to know from the Dynamic Discs Open. As always, this video is brought to you by the Patreon and YouTube members. Thanks for supporting us doing what we love. But before we get into the round recaps, we have to talk about some of the drama that had people on social media going crazier than when this Ricky Ace spit out. Don't worry, we'll get to that in a second. First, we have to talk about this ongoing spectator problem that the Disc Golf Pro Tour is experiencing. Last year at the DDO, it looked more barren than the town of dirt. At least they had a chameleon as sheriff. What do we get in Kansas besides hyzers? Some fans speculated why attendance might be facing some problems, the most common reasoning being pricing. Fortunately, the dgpt allowed us access to the events without having to pay, so I honestly have no clue what the breakdown is. All I can go off is what I'm seeing online. Now, being at every event this season, I can confirm they have not all been like this. Don't get me wrong, majority have seen lighter fields than we expected, but the crowds at Waco and Music City especially felt pretty packed. But what I will say, in 2019, all I had to do was pay $20 to spectate the entirety of the World Championships. And that also included parking, a t-shirt, and a disc. I understand there needs to be ways to make money, but the second problem I've been seeing from fans is the lack of amenities and experience when fans do attend. There needs to be more than just spectating disc golf. Because let's be real, walking in the woods barely seeing the flight of discs of your favorite pro, or for some, can't even tell what you're seeing from how packed it is in the woods. Or some of you thought to yourself and decided on getting the general admission, just to learn you can't see half the course. That's not even an exaggeration for some courses. Besides seeing what some would say the product is, all VIP got was some Costco snacks. At least in Waco, we could listen to some DJ KJ on the sticks. I didn't hear much from the block party, but usually the DDO does a good job at that. If disc golf can capitalize more on opportunities such as that, I think more fans would go to events in person. It all comes down to what they're able to experience, and the more, the better. To be fair, I didn't even see what the extra VIP gets because personally, you'll never catch me doing that, just like nearly every other fan. Feels weird to say that a fan snuck in the VIP sections to make it worth his time, which really just translates to walking on the fairway with a card. I'm not going to sit here and say that I haven't done that as well, but still feels pretty weird to say. Also, sorry dgpt, that was the old me. A solution I've been seeing online is making GA free and having VIP passes people can pay extra for. This isn't that crazy of an idea as the European Open is free, and look at those crowds. Also, the Glassblown Open used to be free to spectate and would also bring in over 1,000 amps to play in their side of the event. Last year, that tournament was on a different weekend, which caused speculation if that was the reason no one decided to show up. Well, this year it was brought back, and it helped, but still not the crowds we're looking for. Is it due to the population of Emporia being so small? Maybe. Are people tired of seeing what I've heard called the worst course on tour? Possibly. Is it most likely everything I mentioned? I mean, that makes more sense than charging fans to watch a practice round, that's for sure. Instead of me absolutely torching veteran baskets, here's what some pros had to say about the basket debate recently, as Paul Ulibarri wants people to understand you need touch in order to putt, and it's not about chucking a Dylan Cease fastball at the dang thing. Drew Gibson brings up the point that no target should have stainless chains, even says that there have been baskets on tour this year that haven't been constructed correctly. Not sure how that's acceptable at the highest level. Drew even questions why there's no standardized targets and why they have to play on different baskets each week, going on to say not all of them are created equally. Uli doesn't disagree there, as he believes there should be standards set. Seems like a good concept to push as one of the leaders on the Players Council. You know, the one that's supposed to be fighting for the players using their voice. Actually, they might have changed the name of that to Tour Life. I can't remember. Holland Hanley also says she would love to see some standards moving forward, as she had to change her approach to short putts. I wonder what could have possibly made her do that. Although she does present a fair point. Everyone plays on the same target, so in no means is there an unfair advantage. Holly Finley also says she's had to make some changes to a soft putt in order to not get spit outs. Even Gannon Burr got some props from fans about figuring out he's no Uncle Rico, so there's no reason to go over the mountains. Drop a comment below on how many spit outs you saw over the weekend. I feel like I didn't see an insane amount, but one thing I learned while being on tour is you only see a fraction of the entire tournament. So to make a conclusion from either side from only watching lead card isn't that fair.
Beth at 69. I just told myself, you got to will this one in there. Whatever you have, just will it in there.
This man is unbelievable. This is what athletes live for. This is the moment.
The FPO kicked off the weekend action as most of the conversation surrounding the play was all about who was not there. And I'm not speaking about the spectators. The FPO field was weakened as all of the European players skipped DDO to head home, forcing the field to lose 4 players that currently find themselves in the top 10 dgpt points, including the top 2 in Evelina Salonen and Kristen Tatar. The action certainly suffered prior to the final day dramatics. The tournament saw its first winner not average over 1,000 rated on the year, as only a single round was scored over 1,000 rated over the entire weekend. Scores were uncharacteristically low on the track despite the weather not being as bad as forecasted. Saw the winner take down the event 14 strokes worse than just the year prior. Sure, there was changes and adjustments as the newly minted Champions Landing went through some adaptations, but certainly not enough to cover that large of a stroke disparity. Instead, we need to be honest. It was a weekend field that saw some poor play, which allowed for a far tighter race than it should have ever been. Day 1 didn't have anyone separate from the pack, as the best score was a 1-under round shared by 5 players. The bulk of the conversation was surrounding Haley King and Missy Gannon, who despite having sloppy days on the putting green and costly bogeys late in the round, looked to be the 2 early favorites to possibly take down the event, as most fans expected both their scores to open up in the later rounds. Understandably, when looking at the stats and just how frequently Missy and Haley did not convert on birdie looks from within the circle. Haley, the defending champion and 2-time winner of this event, missed from C1X 7 total times on day 1, 4 of which resulting in pars and 2 even more costly misses, resulting in a bogey and a double bogey. Missy, who's an even better putter than Haley, had 3 2-miss putts with birdie opportunities that resulted in pars, while even having a more uncharacteristic 3-putt from C1X on 6 that would end in a bogey. And I know most will want to look at these veteran baskets for blame, deservedly so, as their reputation is well justified. Trust there were still plenty examples throughout the weekend of rage-inducing spitouts, but overall, most of the action on the FPO side was just due to sloppy performances, and despite people's expectations, carried over the entire weekend. Tied with Missy and Haley after day 1, Texas teenager Emily Weatherman, who's touring for the first time but had some success during the Texas swing. Hannah Wynn, who just couldn't get things going on the back half of day 1, and Holland Hanley, who scored the most amount of birdies on the round but had to make up for 2 double bogeys in the middle of her round. Day 2 had the worst weather outlook heading in, but fortunately for the players, it would not start till after the play was finished. Still only saw 6 rounds shoot par or better on the day from the 43-player field. Best would be Lisa Fakis. The 3-under round was the only 1,000-rated round, as the crafty vet would go 4-under on the back half. That moved her atop the leaderboard, tied with Missy and Haley. Missy's putting woes would get dramatically worse, as she would finish the day 38% from C1X on day 2, missing 6 birdie opportunities from inside the circle on day 2 alone. That's more like a month of misses for Missy at best. Missy led off the tee for the entire day and put herself in opportunity after opportunity to score continuously, but just could not deliver on the putting green. Even if she converted just half of those looks, which would have been closer to her season average, she would have had a 4-stroke lead or better, which certainly added to the storyline and made for a far more exciting final day and possibly saved fans from a weekend of spotty play. The round heading in was a 3-way tie, but would finish in a wild fashion, featuring a tight race tied late among multiple players. Unfortunately, costly OB on hole 18 that changed everything, an aggregate playoff that would see a 3-hole playoff, a foot fault call that has some fans angry, and even more calls for on-the-course officiating. Weatherman kicked off the action from chase card, came out strong, birdieing 4 of the first 7 holes, putting her at 2-under before a bogey on 8, as she looked to seize an opportunity to get on the podium for the first time of her career. Yet with Missy and Haley's quick start, had most thinking she would be running out of holes to push for the win. Missy started off with a big 40-foot birdie putt, announcing her putting woes would not continue into today, which they wouldn't, as she would only miss from C1X once total. Would add another birdie on hole 2 before Haley looked poised for a battle. Haley would birdie 4 out of the front 5 holes, taking an early stroke lead on Missy before a disastrous 3-putt in the circle led to a bogey and a 2-stroke swing in Missy's favor. Missy would complete the turkey on the next hole with a birdie on 7, but would be her last birdie of the round, losing her lead by hole 10. By that point, the round had already seen a 5-way tie for first at one point, as the ladies looked to score on an easier front half. Weatherman looked in control for the young player, but would have a costly bogey on 16 that most felt knocked her out of contention. Yet Missy's scoring fell flat, and Haley's round was scattered with bogeys and birdies that never afforded either to separate. Add Weatherman's birdie on 17, done only 3 other times that day, went into 18 needing to birdie to push for a possible win. Haley, a hole behind Weatherman, would birdie 17 also, as she entered the driver's seat for a back-to-back win at DDO with a hole to play. Weatherman, on her second throw on 18, pushed left and found her disc on the OB line, where the card would need to decide as to whether it would be OB or not. Harry, the on-course commentator, felt it was OB and had little to no hesitation about it. Unfortunately for Weatherman, Nico could not save this situation through the sales of a lavender disc, as her card mates ruled the disc OB, leading to a Weatherman bogey. That debated card decision would be huge. Haley, in the lead, would completely botch her approach on 18, throwing it into the water for OB, pushing for a 2-player playoff between her and Missy, where had that disc been ruled in bounds, most likely would have been a 3-player playoff. Instead, Weatherman gets a 3rd-place finish, her best of her career. Despite how 18 finished for her, Emily made a huge splash this weekend, and with the debate and the demands for officiating after her shot specifically, has helped her name grow in the sport. Fans are pointing out camera angles of her disc looking like it's in bounds as they shout for officiating. Didn't help that Hokum on the commentary said that some other cards might have given it to her, furthering and angering those calls for the dgpt or pdga to get some form of officiating has become more and more deafening. The optics in its entirety is comical and absurd for anybody wanting to consider themselves a professional sports organization. To have players forced to defend themselves while others on the card who are just as affected on the decision being made, ruling on the outcome, is as bad as it sounds saying it out loud, where it seems like it can be as trivial and high school as it sounds. Certainly by not having officials, it opens the door for debate. See last year's Throw Pink's friendly ruling if you don't agree. Listen, even with officiating, the decision will be just as difficult and close and often debated. But at the very least, it removes it from the player having to be forced to call things, which with what happened later in the FPO action goes to show why most players don't bother at all. A return to the action as Haley's spike hyzer approach that landed in the drink and flopped about as hard as Kim Kardashian at Tom Brady's roast, pushing for a tie and a 3-hole playoff on 16 through 18. I didn't necessarily mind the aggregate playoff, but it feels more acceptable in my head with these hole layouts, but wouldn't necessarily work on most courses. But it's asinine to think what happens if this aggregate playoff ends in a tie also. You go into sudden death after, or replay another 3. If sudden death, why not just do that from the start and lead with it? And if it's the other way, certainly sounds exhausting if you continue with another 3. But I want to hear from you guys and your thoughts on the aggregate playoff. Heading to 16, where the only thing that matters is making the island, or at least we thought. Both made the island, but Missy's putt was what might just have been the main reason for her winning the event. Staring at a death putt that Missy never debated laying up despite 2 holes to play. Buried that for birdie and would go on to birdie the next hole and a 2-stroke lead, playing safe for a win on 18. But not before that controversy I alluded to earlier. Haley would call a foot fault on Missy's approach on 18, which has even more people adding for the need for officiating. The foot fault would be overruled by the marshal, but can we be honest? There was 0 chance that marshal was watching her feet in that moment. Just no shot at all. So even in the paid position of a marshal now, they are not officiating like the refs we are accustomed to at other sports. They're not watching every throw, nor is the action waiting for them to watch every throw. But it's the people's reaction to Haley's call why most pros don't bother at all. Many have been critical of the call and has gone as far as saying the call was in bad faith and she was a sore loser, instead of heralding her for making a call in a difficult moment how she saw it. Listen, we have people shouting from the rooftops about jump putts and time violations, but the moment a player delivers on what so many have asked and demanded in the biggest moment of the tournament, only for her to get beaten down more for that call than her approach choice or that 3-putt on 6, what might just be what is wrong with this sport. And if you're in disagreement and you're not a fan of Haley's call, jump on that officiating bandwagon, as no player is forced to make it at all again, because it's overdue now.
Over on the MPO side, Ricky Wysocki came out hot on day 1, shooting an 11 under that included 2 bogeys. Without a win on this season yet, you can tell the intensity he brings to every tournament. He would need it too, as Calvin Heimberg will continue to show no emotion all the way through the rest of the season. quietly putting up rounds like, I don't know, a 10 under and followed up with a 6 down to find himself 1 back at the end of round 2. Although Ricky would still find himself on top of the leaderboard after a slower day from the field. Gavin Rathbun, who would shoot the hot round for round 2, moved up 5 spots on the lead card for the final day. If you're wondering if Gavin is still unsponsored, the answer is yes. I hope there was a little motivation after the disrespect from Dynamic going into this event. Ezra Robinson will round off the final round lead card with a tie at 15 under. Unfortunately for Ezra, he would start his round with 7 straight pars, only to take a triple bogey on 8. He dropped 8 spots just outside the top 10. Gavin Rathbone would also find some misfortune that put him out of the race for the win early on. Hole 1, actually, with an OB drive that resulted in a double bogey. He would recover and end his round 8 under, finishing on the podium. Someone give this man some damn money for the love of disc golf Jesus. I wish I could say Ricky put up a good fight against Calvin, but then I'd be dumber than the guy that tattooed a Royal Rage stamp on his thigh. Everyone knows the Royal Rage 2 is so much better. Wysocki couldn't stay in bounds, totaling 4 OB strokes on the day, ending his round 4 under. He would need to play much better than that, especially when Heimberg started his round 7 down through 7. From there, pretty much went on autopilot mode as all he needed to do was not take some crazy high number. And I'm talking higher than the old dude who putts exclusively with Grateful Dead stamped hemp wizards. Of course he would not do that. Instead, coasted to his first win of the season in dominating fashion after going 12 down, separating himself by 3 strokes from second place. And that was only to Gannon Burr, who shot an 11 under from chase card, jumped up 3 spots into another second place finish, continuing his top 10 streak. Something Anthony Barella can't say, but I'm sure he couldn't hear that as his ears are probably still ringing from the cheering after his 3rd win on the year. Joey Buckets put together the course record after a 13 down final round, jumping him up 13 spots into a 4th place finish. He ended the front half 5 under, only for him to birdie 11 and do the same thing the rest of the round for an 8-hole birdie stretch. Went 100% from C1X, going 8 for 8, but smacked 6 of his 8 C2 putts, all for birdie. No surprise there. If you haven't already wrote Bucket's name down like we've been telling you for so long now, I'm sorry, but we've officially hit bandwagon territory.
The names didn't stop there, as Andrew Presnell has his best back-to-back performance with a 5th place finish following his big win. Had a solid 9 down on the final day that moved him up the ladder. The weekend even saw Presnell on the lead card and challenged all weekend. Found himself in the top 10 on fairway hits and tee to green. Not normally a track that you would consider Presnell to find himself in the top 5, and which might go to show him possibly taking a further step than some might want to acknowledge. Chris Dickerson isn't going away as he has another top 10 finish on this season, only missing 1 top 10 this year. He's far higher in DGPT points than most would recognize, which is saying a lot because most already don't recognize the DGPT point standings at all. However, his consistency has been up there with what many would consider elites in Gannon Burr and AB. But because he has yet to push for a win this season, and he wears too much camo for him to be a friendly player in these discussions. Look out as the Ringo Starr of the Discmania boys, Gavin Babcock, has popped off for his 2nd top 10 finish of this season, with 2 more top 15 sprinkled in there also. Gavin, now a year under Discmania's lineup, has seemed to have made an effort to slow things down also, and it certainly has paid off thus far. He's never finished in the top 10 at an elite event prior to this season, and has done it twice already this year. Still needs to become more consistent, but if these finishes are a show of his ceiling, then he should continue to improve on those poor finishes also.
Isaac Robinson jumped up 8 spots into a 9th place finish after an 8 under final day. If only he didn't give up 3 strokes going OB. Who am I kidding? His trophy shelf doesn't need a fortune teller crystal ball next to that world championship. Mason Marshbanks would unfortunately put together his worst round of the tournament with a 4 under, dropping him 3 spots for back-to-back 9th place finishes at the DDO. I mean, I guess someone's got to like the course. Now for some weekend quick hitters. Chris Clemens smacked the ace over on hole 16 after debating forehand or backhand. Good choice, Clemenade. Big Germ in the booth seemed to be a success, or it just gave people a chance to slander Nate Doss even more. Connor O'Reilly shows why we still need to be skeptical about this season's stats. Or we're all just confused Paul Ulibarri leads C1X. Comment below how you feel about the Sake Bomb General commercial. I'm on team it was cool the first watch, but doesn't deserve back-to-back airtime. Adam Hammes said screw the DDO, instead caught some fish. Not like the loser fish down in Emporia either. Joey Tamale does his best Austin Turner impression. But just like Turner would say, not enough thigh. Ezra Aderhold tells the world what type of pants he wears. Cupcake Signature looks about as good as Swiss cheeses. Simon Lizotte shows off his new practice putt routine. Your move, Paul. Pros now embark on the cross-country drive to the West Coast. I'm glad we didn't drive out that way, but I mean, if someone wanted to fly us out, I wouldn't be mad. And that's everything you need to know from the Dynamic Discs Open. This happened to be the first event this season the boys weren't at, but that doesn't mean the content's gone. Join us every championship Sunday as we watch the final round live. We did a test run yesterday, and it wasn't horrible, so we're going to run it back. Make sure to follow the Disc Golf World to not miss out on that and more now that we're back not living in a minivan. Guys, I have a bed now. That shit's crazy. If that doesn't deserve a like and subscribe, I don't know what does.